Welcome to the 3G Fitness Podcast,
where 3 generations of trainers come together to discuss all things fitness related.
Welcome everybody to the 3G Podcast. 3 generations of fitness coming from 3 personal trainers coming from 3 different eras. Ooh. On my right is...
I am Coach Cisco.
From the millennial.
Yes, sir.
I'm Coach Mike from the baby boomer.
And I'm Coach Kyle, zillennial.
All right. Now today we have a special guest, Tommy Staup.
Nice. Such a special guest. It makes Mike smile from ear to ear. Look at that.
Round of applause for
there
our
you go,
special
Tom.
guest
Welcome in.
Yeah, I like that intro.
Tom's a powerlifting coach. He's also a recovery and injury trainer. So I'm gonna ask you, what got you into the recovery and injury part?
So that probably came on like about a couple of years ago. Like I was saying before, I actually went to school for physical therapy.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I should have asked you that.
Yeah, I'm a strength coach, primarily focused in powerlifting. That's the majority of the clients that I work with. I have a few that have kind of trickled in and out that have worked more on the pain and injury side. I have a few that are actually going through a little bit of like rehab style work right now, herniated discs, bulging discs, things like that. I've worked with first responders. I actually started in the sport performance realm. So I actually came from college sport performance. And before that, the goal, like I said, was to actually be a physical therapist. So I went to school originally for physical therapy. And as I was going through coursework, I realized like 80 to 90% of the people in my class were all doing the same thing, trying to do that PT/OT. So the market, like saturation, was going to be crazy by the time I graduated. And we had a strength coach from UCI come and speak to us, and he talked about, strength and conditioning and being able to be in the weight room, but also getting paid for it. I'm like, that sounds dope. Like, let's do that. And so a couple years ago, I started working with a couple people in the older population. They were 55 and plus, and a few of them were having kind of these nagging problems. And I realized there's this huge population of people that want to get strong. They might not necessarily be like elite or anything like that as far as the powerlifting world goes, but that was something that they wanted to do but were held back. And realizing that this whole like population was missing, and then kind of looking further in strength sports that, like, yes, there are nicks and bruises and you kind of get a little beat up because you're kind of pushing heavy weight. It's not supposed to be fun, right? Like all the time. It's meant to be hard and difficult. But if there's a problem that's consistently happening while lifting or training and it's not being addressed, then that's probably a sign to have it looked at. And so going through and working with a couple of my clients, realizing that there was this gap missing, pushed me to kind of search this out a little bit more. And so I'm going through a curriculum and a certification right now, which is through a company called Active Life. And their whole goal is to bridge that gap between healthcare and fitness and everybody who kind of gets lost in between in that gap. And so taking those principles and applying them to strength sports so we can still have an improvement in performance and we can still hit crazy numbers, but also have a longevity aspect to it, right? Because if you're out there squatting 700 pounds at 25, but you're using a walker by 40, it's like, well, what's the point of doing all that in the first place? You know what I mean? So seeing that need and trying to kind of bring that into the strength sports side was really the motivation.
So trying to help people not be like Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah, exactly. Although, there's probably a few other issues in that one, but
for sure, 100%.
And what were you going to school for, if you don't mind me asking?
So I did my bachelor's in kinesiology at Cal State Fullerton.
Okay.
And then I got my master's in kinesiology with an emphasis. It was a dual track program. So I did strength and conditioning, and then I did corrective movement and orthopedic rehab. And it was at a school called AT Still. So they're out of Arizona, but that program luckily was online. So I got to work full time and also go through that and intern all at the same time to be able to kind of get my career started.
So they went. So were you always interested in like more of orthopedic? So what does this? can you clarify that a little bit more? Was that specifically like, when I think orthopedic, I think more like really physical therapy, you know, foot problems and stuff like that? Like what program was that kind of tailored to or anything like that?
Yeah, exactly as you would say. A lot of it was looking at movement from the corrective side. There was that physical therapy kind of rehab aspect to it. And at that point in time, the real reason I actually went to get my master's was because the original goal was to be the director of a sport performance program at a college.
Oh.
And in order to do that, you have to have a master's.
Okay.
And I had already had about a year's worth of intern work behind me. So my resume looked good. And it was, you know, I just needed my CSCS. And going through and studying for that, I was like, well, it kind of made sense to just, you know, like, let's just go get the master's now and spend time kind of boosting my resume further, so that way it was a little bit easier to get into that track.
Mm-hmm.
But the same idea even then was to bring a little bit more of the movement quality corrective work into the weight room for college students, because the same thing, right? Like, not everybody is going to go pro. It's like what, like 2% of athletes go pro in the sports that actually have a professional league. And if these guys are dedicating, you know, 4 or 5 years to college athletics, and then they're expected to go into a professional role that isn't athletics at all, but the same thing, like if they're beating themselves up for 4 or 5 years and then they can't walk or they can't do certain aspects of just daily living, then what's the point?
Wow.
You know?
So was that kind of the thing that triggered you to kind of, because you said it sounded like you wanted to be a sports director, right? So
Yeah.
that was the original thing. But then you transitioned to working more as a strength and conditioning coach. Was that like firsthand experience of seeing these athletes, you know, go through that 4-year process, and then once they graduate, them not having a professional ass avenue for their sport that they were training for? Like, was that like you witnessing that kind of transition you away from that, you know, and into more like working with individuals one-on-one?
It actually kind of happened by accident.
Oh, okay.
So I was interning for a while, and then once I finished that, like I said, once I finished that year's worth of intern work, because most jobs require a minimum of a year.
Yeah.
Once I finished that, I still had my CSCS to go, so that way I could meet the NCAA standards. But studying for that and having to get through that, I was kind of in this weird in between. So I found a job that didn't require a CSCS certification.
Okay.
And I was working with mostly baseball, softball athletes. When COVID hit, I had just left that job, and it was a weird transition because COVID was kind of on the rise, but we weren't in lockdowns yet. And I went to work for a barbell club because they needed they just needed somebody who had Olympic weightlifting experience, and I had my USAW. And so I went to work for them. The guy who owned the club was looking for a powerlifting coach specifically, and asked me if I wanted to just run that head coaching job. So I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then 2 weeks later, we shut down. And so it was like, and so then at that point, you know, it's like 4 or 5 months of like, you don't know what's going to happen. In that time frame, still studied for the CSCS, but then NCAA regulations had adjusted based on the COVID protocol and things like that. And there were a lot more hoops to jump through. By that point in time, I was already out of the game for like a year and a half. And in the college world, it's all about networking.
Yeah.
So I kind of got pushed into this weird direction and ended up kind of falling into powerlifting as far as coaching goes, kind of backwards. So it was never something that I strive for in that way. It was just kind of, this is the route. Like, just walk it, you know?
I was going to ask, like, what inspired you to focus more on, like, strength athletes rather than just, like, general population?
I've just always loved the gym.
Yeah,
I've always loved the gym. I grew up doing athletics. I've been lifting since I was 12.
Okay.
And so being in and out of the weight room, being around weights and lifting has always just been the thing. And it was, when I was doing undergrad, it was always like, all right, you do PT or you go be a PE teacher, right? Like, that was kind of the ones that got pushed the most. You never really understood or knew all the other routes that were a possibility.
Right.
And so then actually going through like those intro classes, that's when you find like there's way more that you can actually do. And so then falling into strength and conditioning work, I'm like, yo, this is sick. Like, I'd rather just be in the weight room all day and coach athletes, you know?
Got you.
So,
you know, we're all trainers. Okay. So what are the most common accidents and, you know, that clients are doing wrong to, you know, to get injured?
That's a good question. I think From my experience and from what I've seen, I know a lot of the more common ones you'll see guys have. They'll be like back pain problems, right?
Now, is that caused by not having good form and technique, mainly, or is that just too much weight for that body type?
I think that's I from my
It varies.
from my, yeah, right.
It's a little bit of
it
both.
kind of
Yeah,
depends.
yeah,
It kind of
yeah.
depends for sure. I would say it's more on the side of just not understanding how to move or move well. And I would actually say I would even take it a step further and look at how our bracing mechanics, understanding how your torso should work, understanding creating that foundation is probably step one before learning how to move about that particular position and being able to kind of boost that. So a lot of times when I have guys that have back problems, or even people that are at the gym that they may not necessarily be my client, but I've worked with them on understanding bracing mechanics and how to use their breath appropriately. As soon as we clean that up, it's like everything changes.
Right.
You know?
Because that's just all your core right there.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, because I'm a power lifter, okay, and I'm almost 68,
Yeah.
and I don't have any injuries. I mean, I've gotten hurt, but not injured to a point. No.
First of all, you ain't perfect. You got injuries.
I have
Don't try to paint a
Shoulders
perfect
messed
I
up.
have
Yeah,
aches and pains.
His hips are tight.
I have aches and pains, but not hurt. To where
Yeah.
I have to go to the doctor. And,
You're bone on bone in the
What do you
shoulder.
mean?
Yeah, for real. You literally did it. We did a whole episode of
That's
you.
hey,
That
that's
sounds like a
that's
68-year-old powerful,
longevity.
But go on,
Jesus
Mike.
Christ, I've been lifting for 50 years. Come on, something's got to weaken on me.
Oh, okay.
You know, but
you are
changing-
like, I'm not injured.
changing-
I'm this.
Changing
I'm
my
perfect.
technique.
I'm perfect. All right, but
no,
go on,
no.
Mike.
I hurt and I have pain.
Sure,
I have aches
yeah.
and pains because I feel it's because of my age.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But as far as like breaking a bone or doing something at that point,
Yeah, you haven't. I'll give
I haven't
you
done that. All right, but I find that technique and form plays a major role in your lifting
Yeah.
when you're lifting.
Yeah.
For
sure.
that leaning too much or leaning too forward and this and that could pull a disc or give you a herniated disc and pull a muscle
Yeah.
and stuff. So I think form and technique is extremely important. I think that's number one. Even
Yeah.
before you get in and you start working out,
Sure.
a person needs to learn the right technique and form. And you see some trainers in there doing technique, training their clients with bad technique. But the rule of thumb is that you can't go and say, hey, this is wrong.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
And stuff. So in pain and recovery and injury, how do you recover from like a herniated disc or on the lower back? What's is just time off?
So actually, a lot of people, I think there's a lot of bad information. I think there's a lot of bad advice around pain and injuries like that, especially something like that. Because I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's something like 66% of people will have a herniated disc and never know, because it won't necessarily exhibit pain, right? And so, in fact, the guy that I'm working with right now, he has 2 herniated discs, and then he has a bulging disc. And he has pain, but his job, he's a truck driver and he sits for 16 hours a day. So for him, it's going to exhibit some sort of pain or issue. Mm-hmm. And that's why he came to me, was because of that problem. But there's another gentleman that I had started to work with, and he does CrossFit, been totally fine. He's done CrossFit for like 10 years. And all of a sudden started having excruciating back pain, 2 bulging discs, degenerative disc disease. But that's not an uncommon problem. That's not an uncommon thing, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are walking around with that. The way that you manage or handle it is to your point, the biggest thing. And it might not necessarily be rest. It may just be dialing back, understanding how the body's supposed to move, because the spine is supposed to move, right? This idea of rigidity in the spinal column is ridiculous, because we can twist and bend and move and do all these things. But choosing to rest and then be static is like the worst advice.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. Because I was gonna say, I was gonna ask you that, and you just answered it. Like, if you have an injury, you know, because I've dealt with this with a lot of clients. They'll come in and, you know, they'll have a minor, you know, injury, and then like, oh, can we not, you know, say they come in with like, oh, my knee's been bugging me and it's not feeling too well. Can we not do legs today? And I'll go with the opposite approach. I was like, no, we should do more legs today, but instead of, you know, maybe you were squatting 135, let's just do body weight, you know, let's just move that leg around, you know, instead of doing leg extensions, let's just do like step ups. Let's go after it. I always feel like that would be the smarter approach, is like, obviously listen to your body first, right? If they can tolerate and they can move, go after it. But, you know, they come in thinking they should rest. So what you're pretty much saying is, I mean, what do you think of that?
No, I agree. I think, I mean, because there's other factors at play that you could easily adjust for, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be range of motion, intensity, whatever the load is, like you can lighten it up. My approach is, if there's somebody who has an issue or an injury, they have pain, we're going to assess it first.
Yes.
Right. We're going to run them through an assessment.
There's
Exactly.
different ones. Like, I just got injured during the holidays, and I get it. Like, you know, there's some parts where, yeah, you should move it. But literally, if it's like fresh off the injury, I sprained my ankle, I couldn't move it at all. Like, it's like too much pain. But like Cisco said, if you can tolerate it, then that's when you can start introducing certain movements.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even to that, Allison, actually, because I'll use Allison as an example because you know her. She had sprained her ankle over the summer. And we were like, I think we were 6 weeks out from a meet at that point. And it's like, all right, well, we can't really stop training.
Yeah.
So all we did was reduce range of motion to a point where she could still at least lift heavy-ish,
right, and
still have enough stimulus for the day, so that way we get something out of it for squats, right? Because squat was the only thing that was really affected. Her deadlift was fine. And so we threw her on a box, didn't let her go all the way down, kind of rehab it in a way that made the most sense.
Yeah.
While doing other things in addition to that, because again, if you sit, right, especially with something like that, you're gonna get stiff.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, everything's gonna tighten up, and then you're gonna be worse off even a week or two later from an injury or issue like that, and then you're gonna be in like a lot further along.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So
mine swelled up like a baseball, and I couldn't move it.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And then it wasn't like, go ahead. Go for it. I was gonna say, it wasn't like 3 weeks after until I really started moving it again. You know, like heat packing it, just being proactive with like introducing movement and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, you take it slowly, right? Like you were saying, it's like, okay, you don't want to work legs because of X, Y, Z, but there are still things that we can do. And I think the problem is that a lot of people will either rest it or work around it. And I'm like, I don't want to work around it. I want to modify in a way that makes the most sense, where we can still do what we want. But whether that be, like I said, range of motion, lighter load, I mean, even adjusting for like tempo work or whatever it's going to be, that still allows us to accomplish whatever the thing is for the day without aggravating it further. And then as long as things are back to like their normal in terms of like that 24 to 48 hour time frame, then we're good to go, right? We're still accomplishing what we want for the day, and then being able to at least train with that problem in mind, you know?
But doesn't it, if you're doing exercise or you get injured, okay, and you continue to do it, you do it at lighter weight, aren't you aggravating that injury to a certain point?
Not necessarily, you would think, but I think but then that's where it kind of, like you said, there's layers, right? Like that's where it depends on what it is. So I'll give another example. I have a client right now. He's about 2 weeks out from starting prep. He started having, he has kind of tendon pain in his shoulder. He's had chronic tendon issues, shoulder issues, and so we've cleaned it up for the most part. But about 2 weeks ago, he had another problem in that area, and so just kind of assessing and understanding like what the issue is. You can have tendinitis, right, which is that inflammation. Usually it requires rest at that point, right? Like, we're not going to be able to do much. If we do more, then it's going to piss it off more and you're going to have a bigger problem. But tendinopathy is something that's a little more chronic, that has been a problem for a while and may not necessarily flare up. That actually requires movement in some capacity. So usually what we'll do is we'll do, like I said, the tempo work. We'll do a lighter load. We'll kind of move through the full range of motion that we possibly can at a weight that doesn't aggravate it or cause pain. And we do that for about 2 to 3 weeks, and it'll usually start to clean it up, where we can kind of test it a little bit more, throw a little bit more weight at it, and then be able to kind of take that strength approach again. You know what I mean? So it really depends on what the symptoms are at play, and being able to address it the right way based off what they're communicating and then what you're seeing.
But in general, motion is lotion.
That's right. Got that right.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Well, and then going back to your client Allison, you said she had an ankle injury 6 weeks before her competition. Like, what else did you do to kind of, obviously you said you limited the range of motion, but like, how quick did that heal, and how did that affect her once she got on the platform?
Yeah, so she actually that meet that she did was probably her best meet.
Nice.
To date.
Oh hell yeah.
We attempted a state record on her squat, and she missed it. But she had hit on her second attempt. She had hit a PR, an all-time PR, or a platform PR. Sorry, that she had just missed like 5 months prior.
Okay.
So being able to go from that point and still throw a state record attempt on, having that issue was pretty cool. A lot of it honestly was kind of a mix between like resting it because of the inflammation, but then kind of forcing range of motion where it made sense. And so because I mean, if you're getting ready for a meet, you can't just not squat, right? Like
you have to. You got to.
Exactly. I mean, it's the first movement of the day. So for us, it just wasn't an option to take that time off of the squat bar. So it was really just, all right, let's find a box height that made the most sense so we could still at least do the motion and then feel weight on her back. So that way, if we, had to take a little bit more time doing kind of limited range of motion, she wasn't totally like at a surprise when we started throwing heavy weight back on her back.
So then you guys, with 6 weeks leading up to it, were you limiting the whole range of motion all the way until the day of the meet? Or was there maybe a week or two where she actually did it without the box, squatting down?
He's probably just pushing it little by little.
There's
probably like a fine line, like an art of balance to it that you're trying to just achieve, where it's like you're not pushing it too much to where you're going to re-injure it, but it's like kind of still forcing it to like, yo, you got to kind of speed up the process of getting better.
It would be like daily. It would be like daily, like, all right, coming in, she'd kind of test it without body weight, see how things felt. And then, I mean, we're in constant contact. So she'd always give me updates, like how it felt today, how it felt here. And then I would make her go like for walks. So that way she wasn't just totally, sedentary. And so she would do that. And then as we could push things through and things got better, she felt it took a couple weeks probably before she started feeling confident, being able to go full like depth again. So I would say she still had like a month of being able to do full squats and be able to prep for that meet and not have an issue.
Man, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, because you needed the squats your first lift. I mean, you bomb that out, you're done for
exactly.
Why even stick around,
Exactly.
So do you scale back on a PR when, if she has an injury or something and you're not sure if it's like 100%? Do you scale back on her PR? Do you go down on it a little bit, or do you stay at it?
If we have to, usually my approach, especially for meet day, is we still have something in mind based on prep as far as attempts go. If we have to, because of how things have led into that, then we will make adjustments as needed. Because there's no point in, if we open too heavy, like you said, there's no going back down, right? So chances of bombing out are higher, that's on me at that point.
I've seen people go in and just go to the registration, just back out, because they're not 100% on. They do some warm-ups and they find out, I can't, so they just automatically back out. So.
Okay, but then and just one more thing about Allison, because obviously with the powerlifting, so I coach too powerlifting as well. So you have your squats, your bench, your deadlift. So kind of piggybacking on what Mike said, it sounded like 6 weeks out, maybe you might be testing PRs or anything like that. What about with her other two lifts, her bench, her deads, knowing that for the bench, planting foot, there's some pressure on the ankle. Deadlifts, obviously coming up, there's some pressure on the ankles. Do you adjust on those two lifts as well too, or do you, because you said she was feeling well, do you keep it as the program as it is?
Yeah, we got super lucky and didn't have to adjust anything for that.
Nice.
Yeah, because the way, it was more so range of motion and movement that had a problem, not necessarily like pressure and tension. And so when it came to bench and then deads, because I was a little nervous about deadlifts.
Yeah.
But she's a sumo deadlifter, so the way that just the angle for the ankle totally worked out in our favor, where squat was really the only one that was affected at all and had that problem.
Because you're flexing and extending.
Exactly,
That's where I heard mine too.
So she does, bench is the same, where it's just kind of that neutral position where we didn't have to worry so much about it. So we got super lucky. We didn't have to worry about it at all.
Nice. Yeah. Man. So that's awesome. I like that, like knowing how you're kind of breaking it down. You adjust to your client. One thing I love, and I want to kind of talk more about that, constant communication, and it's communication.
Big time.
You were asking and hearing and adjusting to that. So I think, we'll take like a mini break, but when we come back, I want to kind of hear your theory and your philosophy on what it's like working with clients when it comes to hearing them and adjusting programs.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Sounds good.
Hey guys, my name is Cisco Suarez. I've been a certified trainer for over 15 years, and in 2025 I'm venturing into online training. There I will give you a customized workout plan, nutritional guidelines, and access to me 24/7 to help you stay motivated. Send me a message today to get you started on your fitness journey.
Like 70% of my clientele is actually remote. So I work with mostly remote athletes where the communication style has to be different, and it because we're removed then at that point too, right? No longer are we in person. So now we don't get face to face. They can't read my facial expressions. I can't read theirs. The tone is gone unless we're on a phone call,
so you
which
really
is
got to be detailed in your program,
exactly,
like meticulously.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's forced me, because that's not always how it was, right? Like we were at a gym and everybody was in person. I maybe had 1 or 2 remote athletes, and then when we left that gym, it flip flopped, and I had only like 2 or 3 in persons, and everybody else was remote. And so it was kind of this forced learning curve to understand the importance of communication. And I've had my issues and hiccups over the years, and I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to grow in that aspect, especially, and finding like what works best. But it's really forced me to adjust and improve my feedback style, how much I communicate with them, how I communicate with them, and making sure that check-ins are like the number one thing that happens. And it's not always asking the same questions. It's trying to dive deeper and understand more about the situation, whatever it may be. You know what I mean? And so like I'll give an example. I have an athlete. He's actually in Oregon. He goes to school at UO. And he just hurt his knee, not at the gym, but at his house. He like was doing something and banged his knee on like their heater in the apartment, and he was having a problem putting pressure on it. He was really nervous to squat, and so we're like, okay, like let's talk tomorrow. Let's see how it's going. You know, give it a little bit of rest, right? Sure, Mike, like
there
that.
you go.
and then we can talk a little bit more about it tomorrow and kind of figure it out. And so he ended up being able to squat just fine, but weight was an issue, right? He kind of pushed it a little bit. I think a little bit of a confidence issue was there too, because you know, if you're having a knee problem, like you're not going to feel great. But now he's kind of on that upswing. It's only been a couple days, you know. But trying to find and understand kind of that balance of, okay, how much can I push you, but also how much do you actually need, as far as like me giving you a little bit of encouragement and love to do it, to, you know, is kind of that balance and figuring it out, you know?
Yeah, because with remote clients, that's something I'm trying to dab my hands into. And that's the one thing I feel that I would struggle with, is that you're not there in person. You can't hear the tone. You can't see it. And it's just, you got to trust that they're doing their portion as well, too. Because it's like, all right, you know what? If that client who's in Oregon, you know, knee injury, hey, I know you were maybe squatting, you know, 200 kilos, let's just bring it down to 100. Did you trust that he really did it or anything like that? Now, obviously, we have videos and whatnot to see it, but I feel like that moment that he's probably going to get under the bar and you're not there, you know, how do you help an athlete like overcome the confidence when you're not physically there? Like, what do you do leading up to them to help them be like, to do it? Yeah,
that is something that is definitely challenging for sure on the remote side. And it's that's where I would say that constant communication does have to happen, you know, because it is a learning curve, and coaching remotely, I would say, is not for everybody, because of the challenge of being able to communicate something effectively that they can understand, that they don't need you in person to be able to understand either. Right. And so I think having kind of there's 2 like things. It's the constant communication, because that's what's going to build that buy-in and trust, right? If you have their back and they know that you have their back, then they're going to trust you fully to be able to run the program. So if you do ask them to do something like that, where it's like, hey, like, yeah, we have 200 program for today, but maybe we should dial it back quite a bit because of XYZ. They might question you, right? Or like they might kind of push back, because I mean, what athlete doesn't want to lift heavy? But at the end of the day, if there's enough buy-in to you and enough buy-in to what you're doing, they understand the long-term gain, right? It's just one day, okay, cool, one day of going light isn't going to be a big deal. And so being able to have that constant communication to be able to effectively communicate what's needed, but then also I think a lot of it is just showing you care, you know, absolutely. Like through that communication, it can't just always be about, you know, here's a program, here's your feedback, here's this, here's that, blah, 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 whatever. Because if that's just dry, and it's not going to get very far, right? But with all my athletes, it's taking the time to understand who they are and connect with them on a level that's going to be more than just the gym.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to be, I mean, they're going to be cared for, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's a strength coach. I think he's at, gosh, I don't know where he's at. He was at Kansas for their basketball team for a while. I think he's in the NBA now. But he's like, before you teach a guy how to squat, learn his name.
Yeah.
Like, you know, ask him his name. Like, especially in the college world. Yeah. Like, if you've got 50 guys in the room and you can't name every single one of them, you're probably doing things wrong.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And so it all starts with, like, I mean, treat him as a person. You know, if you can build that up, then that's gonna set you above everybody else.
Right. I think, like you said, it boils back down to like you said earlier, is like finding what their personality is, you know, and then just kind of catering to that.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
But the one thing as coaches, maybe you see it as well as I see it. Athletes have a different mentality.
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure.
You give them a challenge, they go beyond.
Yeah.
With a client, you give them you tell them do this, well, okay, yeah, all right. But when you work with an athlete, it's totally different.
Yeah.
They can't.
They know how to be outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah. It's
too much sometimes.
They go beyond.
Yeah, sometimes too much. Yeah.
They go beyond what you ask because they don't want to fail.
Yeah.
That's their biggest fear is failing.
Sure.
And stuff. So how do you deal with the failure part? Because we all fail because we don't hit every lift every single time.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get to that point to where you have to build their self-esteem as of confidence. So how do you deal with that?
No, that's a good question. Because I have a mix, right? Like I have some guys that'll go too hard, and I have some guys that are not, that they just won't push themselves hard enough. And it's interesting dealing with both. The guys who will push themselves too hard are the former athletes, right? They're the ones that maybe they did dabble in college a little bit, or maybe they competed even in high school at a higher level. And having them, I think this is where education is so important with a client. And I think that a lot of guys who get in the fitness space miss out on being able to educate their clients in a way that help them understand what the overall goal is and help them understand what the process is to get there, to be able to actually understand and be in tune, right? And so, like I mentioned, I have 4 or 5 guys that I've worked with for 5 years now, and we're at a point where I will write their program, but we'll be in such a communication where I'll ask them what they're thinking as far as like, okay, where should we go with this? How did that feel? What did that look like? What, give me your feedback on what you think has worked and what has done well, because they're the ones that are going through the program, right? Yeah. Like they're doing the work. Yeah. I'm the dude that's just writing sets and reps, but they're the ones that are actually putting in the time and effort to actually get better. So if they understand and they feel a certain way, then they can give me better feedback than I could ever see. And so if I can understand how to at least take that, run with them together and do it with them, right? Instead of kind of just being on my own, like solo, running the route or whatever it is, then that's only going to get us so far. But if I can bring them with me and I can teach them and educate them on whatever principles make the most sense, so that way they can gain the understanding, gain the buy-in, then we're going to have more in terms of being able to dial it back when we need to, or to push them and motivate them further if they have to, because they're not pushing hard enough, right? And so I pride myself in being able to tell my guys, like, ask as many questions as you can, because if you ask me something, I tell them all the time, if you ask me something about the program and I can't tell you why, fire me on spot, because if I'm putting stuff in there without justification, then I don't deserve to coach you. But I also tell them that I pride myself in educating them and understanding the principles and why we're doing what we're doing so much, that I would be confident in having any one of my guys being able to take a couple clients and go and coach them better than than several other trainers that are out there doing it too, because they probably know more than the majority of guys doing it at your local 24-hour or LA Fitness. Yeah. Because we just take that time to educate. And I think that also is kind of that other aspect of being able to communicate in such a way that helps them understand. Because if they understand and see it, then they're going to see and understand the big picture. It's not just this, here's what we're doing the next week. Like, I guess we'll just kind of figure it out, or here's what the next month looks like, and I don't know what I'm doing 6 months from now. But it's like taking the time to map it all out and have them realize and understand is going to be the biggest factor to getting them to buy in and trust, and then stick with you for a long time.
That's awesome, man.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. That's kind of like that quote of like, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but if you teach a man how to fish,
Yeah.
you can
So
feed him
how
for a
much is
lifetime.
Yeah.
Like you got to teach him.
Go ahead.
Go for it. Go for it.
Go ahead. I thought you was done, bro.
I was done.
Well, I
Go
think,
ahead.
He was done.
but I think to that point, real quick, I think to that point too, like when it comes to the powerlifting side, like they're not going to lift competitively forever, but if I can give them the tools to at least make it through now, and then when their competitive career is over, whether they stay on with me or not is not an issue. It's them staying in the gym to continue to stay fit.
Right.
And with the pain guys, right? Like if I'm working with somebody who has like the guy right now has herniated discs, my goal is to put myself out of a job with him. I don't need to have his. I don't need
Forever.
him on program forever. I want him to get so good at what he's doing and feel great to be able to do it on his own, if that's what he wants.
Right.
If he wants to stay on and he wants to continue on with programming and my coaching, then that's great. Like I'm not gonna say no. But if I can put him in a position to where he's confident and comfortable being able to do his own thing, pain free, and not having to deal with that injury anymore, then that's the win.
Exactly. Exactly. 100%.
So, how much of it is mental and how much is it strength and power when you're powerlifting? Let's just say.
I think it goes back to that like 50-50 split of guys who go too hard and guys who don't go hard enough, right? I think what I've noticed a lot of times is that if they're not pushing themselves really hard, it probably is a mental issue. There's probably some roadblock that we have to overcome and help them understand that they can do it, they have the ability to do it, and we should probably figure out what that looks like to be able to kind of push them past that so they can perform well. With guys that go too hard, it's usually not really a mental problem. There's usually not really like a mental block at all. Because they have all the confidence in the world. They walk into the gym and have this swagger, and it's like, how about like let's maybe work on this today. Let's do this, and it's gonna probably end up being more like technique work or addressing something in terms of what the lift would be in order to progress them the right way.
Well, I'm talking about like in competition, they missed
Oh yeah.
the first lift.
Yeah.
That they probably hit before
Sure.
many times at the gym,
Sure.
but they missed it that time. It's got to come into a mental part of it, right?
Yeah.
Because they can hit it, but mentally they're thinking, they're more on the negative part of it.
Sure.
How do you overcome that? How do you deal with that?
That's the know your athlete approach too. So like before, I can't approach all my athletes the same. Each one, I have a different methodology, a different way of handling them before a meet, after a miss. It's all different. But sometimes they all need that tougher approach, like kind of a tough love approach a little bit, because if they miss something, we don't necessarily have the luxury of time to be able to think about it and get over it. We have to it could be anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes where you have to get back out there and do it again. And so sometimes, depending on the athlete, I might just go up to them and they just need to have a short-term memory. They need to forget about it and they need to focus on what's next. And whatever that looks like, if it's taking a walk and coming back and taking the 2 minutes of a break to get out of the room. Some people I've had some where they do kind of freeze up a little bit and they start to kind of get into their head a little bit. Those are the ones that I would say 70% of the time I'll be tougher on, and 30% of the time I'll have to be more of an understanding approach and kind of comfort them and be able to work through it and then get back to what the task is at hand. But a lot of times I think because I have that relationship with all my guys and we do have that trust, it puts more confidence in me to be able to take more of the tougher approach and tell them like, hey, like get your head out of it, focus on what's next, and let's get this attempt on the board so we can move on.
How do you do it, Cisco? Because I know you run into that problem.
Whereas a mental game?
Yeah, the whole mental part of
I
it.
think the whole mental aspect is the same thing. You got to approach it differently with everybody because, how Tom's saying, everybody's different.
Yeah.
There's some people where you can just literally slap them in the back and be like, get under it, bro. You can do that. I did that with one of my guys. But then, I'm probably not going to do that with some of my other ones, like my female one. I'm not going to like slap her in the back or anything like that. Well, we found out that has worked. But it's just one of those where it's that anticipation of like when they go up there, they miss their first lift and they know they can do it. It's just kind of regathering and regrouping them. And the same thing is my approach that's common is I'm never panicked. I'm always calm and cool as a feather,
Yeah.
because they're probably panicked or they're probably stressed. So if I come in like as I coach, like what happened? I was like, nah. I come in, I'm calm, I'm cool. It's like, hey, dude, talk me through what happened. What'd you feel? What'd you do that? So it's like almost the same thing. It's just that constant communication, and then just reminding them like, hey, we've done A, B, C, D to get all the way to Z. All right, you can do this. All right, take a few breaths. And so with one of them, I take a few breaths. I'll walk away from her or anything like that. The other one, like I said, I'm more in his face, but like in a calm manner, because he kind of responds better to that too. So you got to find a way. One of them, remind them what we did, remind them the plan that we've executed. I walk away for a little bit, let her regather, regroup. She'll get back under it. Boom, she's great. The other one, hey, just stay more on his face or anything like that, and just have him stay focused. Because with him, I feel like if I walk away, he might just get distracted and then get back to like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? So you got to kind of listen to everybody. But the most common denominator that I have is that I approach them in a calming manner, and then like remind them to refocus. It's like, all right, and then remind them what we've done. We've done the work. Because usually the map and the work leading up to it, I always kind of tell them the work was harder than the actual platform day. I'm all like, you just got to do these lifts 3 times each. We've done this sets of 3 for like 8 times or something like that. We've done this harder in the past, and you've done this. So just reminding them of the work or anything like that. But the common thing I think is always remain calm, because you miss your first lift, you're like in your head. The last thing you want is your coach to come in and be like, well, what? Now both of you guys are all like, I don't know what to do or anything like that.
It gets in there, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you miss that first lift, you're like, oh my God,
So, but then one thing I like is like, you program or anything like that. And we were talking about this is, so me and Mike, we program a little differently, but we still get to the same destination. He doesn't program, deload, and I do program deload. And I know you kind of were more on his side, but I like how you explained it. I mean, what's your opinion when it comes to programming a power lifter and incorporating deload?
So I let me preface it with, my coach does program deloads for me.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, it's not that I'm not totally biased away from it.
There's different avenues to get to the destination. Everyone will get there. There's just different avenues. There's no wrong avenue.
I've always agreed with it. There's different ways of getting to your goal and to your destination. I do understand that. But we're talking, the views on deloading.
So what's your views on deloading, Tom?
I think so. I don't write deloads into my programming.
Okay.
I don't. I do that on purpose, because if we can manage the load and we can manage volume appropriately during the working weeks, then we don't necessarily need to throw a deload in there, right? And so as I was saying before, when I first started coaching powerlifting specifically, I came more from that like West Side conjugate style, 2 max effort days, 2 dynamic efforts. They didn't really run a deload. Every once in a while, I would throw I usually run 3-week waves. When we were doing the conjugate work, the West Side work. And then every 4th week, sometimes I would throw in, it wouldn't necessarily be a direct deload. It would almost be like a repeat of week 1. And so it would be some slightly less volume than week 1. The percentages would be lower. It wouldn't necessarily be this like super high intensity, type work, but it would be just enough to kind of still create a stimulus that was necessary for progress, but not totally wreck them. Mm-hmm. And then as we progressed, I realized, well, that wasn't really like necessary all the time. And again, that comes from the Russians, right? Where, they're like, why would you intentionally build just to then intentionally draw and dial back? And I like that approach. And that's the approach that I've been taking, almost the entire time. But planning the year out in advance and understanding where we're trying to get to has been the biggest key for me. So I don't plan block by block. I don't plan week by week. I don't plan, this to that. Everything that we're doing for all of my guys is looked at from an annual basis. And so like we have meets planned out through the summer by the time October, November rolls around of the year prior, because then at least that gives me an understanding of who's competing when and what it looks like and how we can approach that. Because I'll still run lower volume or higher volume. We'll do truer hypertrophy work. I might throw in a week or two of GPP. So those things are all still kind of that ebb and flow of understanding what the goal is for the weeks that are coming. But then that allows us to not necessarily have to program direct deloads unless somebody is going too hard at the weight that's prescribed, right? So like some of my guys I'll do RPE work with. Some of my guys I'll do prescribed percentages. It really just depends on what plays to kind of their personality type more. And with the guys that are, what I've learned is that some guys, even though they understand how to gauge RPE, they may not necessarily stick to it very well.
Yeah.
Because they just want to go hard in the gym all the time. And so like I have one guy, I've been working with him for almost a year. And he's that guy. He wants to go in the gym. He wants to go hard every time. It doesn't matter what the rep scheme is. It doesn't matter if I throw an RPE on there. Like he's like, I just want to go heavy and I want to hit as much as I can for every set. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you're gonna like kill yourself. I'm like, this is not. This is not
he
smart.
does have good recovery days, right?
First thing he does is he defends that guy.
Yeah.
He defends that guy. You literally described Mike.
So actually, I've had to put in pseudo deloads because his CNS is just so wrecked from the load that he puts himself under. And in fact, actually, I think he had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment on his own, because about a month ago he had him on SSB squats. And I think he just loaded it too heavy, and he actually got folded and almost got injured.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Now,
And
see,
so,
but that to me, that's overcompensating yourself right there. When you do that, you're doing more than what you know.
Sure.
Some people don't know their limits.
But that's that's to the point. And so
that's part of
for
the ego
him,
lifting.
Yeah.
And all that,
And
you
so
know,
for
it's
him,
just
like he's one that we don't run RPE on anymore because of that reason. But I also think too, like, I mean, as bad as it was, thank God he wasn't hurt. He had a little bit of he had some like concussion symptoms, so he had to take a couple days off.
God,
it was
bro,
bad. I'm telling you, it was bad. But and so like we talked through it. You know, we were able to kind of work through all that. And he's back lifting now. But this is gonna sound bad. It almost was necessary to happen though, because
that's not bad. That's
it was
good.
like
That's
that was like the best worst case scenario possible, because yes, he learned, right?
Yeah.
And so now when we talk about weight, he's like, now we're going through a little bit more of a like linear progression type style, just to kind of build him back into it, especially because of that that issue. But talking to him now, he's like, all right, cool, like, I feel a little bit better. He approaches things a little bit more intelligently, and kind of has that IQ building now in the gym. But it takes time, it takes time, because I have a lot of my guys who were in person before that did go remote. They had to go through that learning curve because now they didn't have me anymore.
Yeah.
And not to say that I was a crutch, but it's easier in person to be like, okay, just throw this on, do this weight, do that, do this. And kind of limit them a little bit and dial it back. But when you're on your own, you have free range.
Well, that's the thing too. That's why like the RPE system is pretty much like, it's funny because when you're there visually seeing them, you can probably calculate like, that was probably an 8. You know, we might need to tone you down or anything like that. To them, they probably do it. They'll be like, oh, they can't gauge it as well sometimes. Sometimes I feel like us as coaches and trainers, we know our athletes' bodies better than they do sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why I think it's one of those where I love it when I see people, on social media, they'll do a lift and they'll be like RPE 9, and I'll be like, but I didn't see a single body of shaking you. Like, you probably could have added some more to that. I'm like, and for the listeners that don't know,
that
RPE,
tremor is like the biggest indicator, huh?
That tremor is, but like you can see it. So, and we're just pretty much gauging the level of difficulty in layman's terms,
on a scale of 1 to 10.
On a scale of 1 to 10, for those of them that's like, what is RPE? Yeah. And usually, people do a lift and they'll be like, oh, that was extremely difficult. That was like a 9. All right, cool. If it was easy, it might be like a 6 or something. So
I will say, I think with RPE, I think I would prefer a chronic undershooter though than a chronic overshooter.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
1,000%.
And like me, because I was running RPE for a little while with my coach, and I would chronically undershoot just because that's just like my habit. You know?
Yeah.
But if I'm working with somebody and I do assign RPE, I would prefer that they chronically undershoot, because then they're not going to burn their CNS as much, right?
That too.
So then we don't necessarily have to throw a deload in. but then we can manage it appropriately too. And then if I have to eventually, as like say we're getting to the end of this block, we're peaking or whatever, then it gives me a chance to actually go back and then assign or prescribe a load. So that way I can push them a little bit in a way that's going to make the most sense without totally killing their body. So then we can still make progress and still see some result. But I mean, if they're chronically undershooting, like, let's rock with that. I'm cool with that.
So you don't necessarily program deloads, but you adjust to your client's needs accordingly.
Right, exactly. Everything I do is individualized.
Yeah.
Nice, Tom. Well, then, like I said, this was great. Where can our listeners find you so they can actually get a personalized program for you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. My handle, it's at Tommy Staup, at TOMMYSTAUP. My company that I run is The Bunker. Our Instagram handle is at The Bunker Athletics. Okay. And so my business partner and I run that. And I mean, yeah, Instagram, throwing up content, you know.
Nice.
And
any athletes competing anytime soon?
Yeah, so our first meet is going to be at the end of March this year. Yeah, end of March. I'll be taking 5. So it's going to be PLU Southwest Regionals, and we're going to try to get a couple guys qualified for nationals in the summer.
Nice. Where's that going to be at?
That'll be in New Jersey.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow. You want to represent for the East
Coast. Yeah. So it'll be good.
Well, good luck for that, man. That'll be at the end of March. We got what, like about 6 more weeks, huh?
Yeah, a few weeks. Yeah, it's coming up.
More than that. Sheesh.
So,
man. So now that we got this deloading thing out, now I can stand my ground a little bit harder. Tom, thanks a lot, man.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry, I apologize in advance.
I mean, that's exactly how I was too. It's like I don't necessarily deload, but I will adjust according to my needs.
Watch in about 2 months, we're gonna find Mike with the SSB bar in the squat, like on the floor at the gym, just because of that. Yeah, I was like, there you go. Yeah. Well, Tom, it was a pleasure having you on here,
Thank
man.
You for having me.
Thanks for coming, man. Thanks for coming. Very insightful.
I'm gonna have to connect with you and help me get over my plateau.
Yeah, we'll talk.
So once again, man, I'm Coach Cisco.
I'm Coach Mike.
I'm Coach Kyle.
This was Coach Tom. So
yes, sir.
You guys enjoy, like, comment, subscribe.
We'll see you on the next one.
Reach out to any one of us and let us know if you guys need any help. We'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
Later.